Hello everyone. Our today's lesson is about John Keats, and we will talk about he is just one ode. So we have here three contents according to our syllabi. The first one is John Keats as one of the outstanding poets of Romanticism in English literature and his literary activities. And the second content is the major themes and the structure of John Keats' poems, an analysis of John Keats' poems. We wrote here poems, but we'll just talk about one poem because I think it's one of the longest poems by John Keats, and I think it would be enough for you to analyze just one poem by him. So let's get started. So John Keats was an English romantic poet, and he was one of the main figures of the second generation of romantic poets, along with Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe Shelley. And despite his works having been in publication for only 4 years before his death from tuberculosis at the age of 25, and he did not take an active part in the political struggle of his time, but the general meaning of his poetry allows him to be placed among the progressive romantic poets. Sorry for pausing. And so his literary activity, I chose just some of odes and poems by him here. You can see the names, and I would like you to remember all of the names of his poems that I wrote in this slide, because I will make some exam questions, multiple choice questions for you in your exam. So try to remember correctly which one is his literary according to, which one belongs to his literary activity. And but we will talk just one ode on a Grecian urn, and we'll talk about the meaning, the symbols and analysis, and also motifs, themes, and besides the structure, form, meter we will discuss in this PPT and video lesson. So Ode on a Grecian Urn, written in 1819, and so Ode on a Grecian Urn was written in 1819, and it's a complex, mysterious poem with a simple setup, and undefined speaker looks at a Grecian urn, which is decorated with evocative images of rustic and rural life in the ancient Greece. These scenes fascinate and mystify and excite the speaker in equal measure. They seem to have captured life in its fullness, and yet are frozen in time. And the speaker's response shifts through different moods, and ultimately the urn provokes questions more than it provides answers. And the poem's ending has been and remains the subject of varied interpretation. The urn seems to tell the speaker, and in turn the reader, that truth and beauty are one and the same. Keats wrote this poem in a great burst of creativity that also produced his other famous odes, like Ode to a Nightingale and so on. And though this poem was not well received in Keats' day, it has gone on to become one of the most celebrated in English language. So let's talk about the themes of this ode. The major themes: the mortality, art, beauty, truth, history, and the imagination. So let's look at the first stanza. So you see here 10 lines, And we will talk about the rhyme scheme and meter in the upcoming slides. That's why I don't want to talk about it. Just read it, pause the video and read, and then I will explain you the theme of morality in these lines. So, mortality. We have here 4 sections, but I will explain widely. But just even if you know this text written in this slide, it can be enough for you. But if you want to understand deeply this stanza, you should listen to me carefully, and you have to make some notes for yourself. Because I will make the exam questions according to not just only slides, not just written based, but according to my speaking too. That's why I make some notes. So mortality is the main theme in this ode. Ode on a Grecian urn is a complex meditation on mortality. This preoccupies the speaker, who responds by seeming to both celebrate and dread the fleeting nature of life. The scenes on the urn depict a classical world that has long since passed, and yet, in being fixed on the urn itself. These scenes also evoke a sense of immortality. The urn is therefore a contradiction. Its scenes speak to vibrant humanity, and because they are frozen in time, seem to represent a kind of eternal life. At the same time, everything and everyone in the urn's world is no more. Sensing this contradiction, the poem can be read as a process of response in which the speaker tries to make sense of mortality, and both that of others and their own, without ever coming to a comfortable resolution. And importantly, one of the main purposes served by an urn was to hold the ashes of the dead. Though it can't be said definitely that it's the sort of urn Keats had in mind when writing this poem. He would no doubt that have been aware of this as a possible interpretation. The urn is the sole object of contemplation in the poem, and accordingly thus, and the fleeting nature of human life is present from the beginning. And the speaker here projects their anxiously shifting thoughts about mortality onto the urn, which seems to stand for both life and death at the same time. And at points in the poem, the pictures on the urn seem to come alive for the speaker. Stanzas 2 and 3, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, exactly. Stanzas 2 and 3 are full of praise for the scenes at hand. You can see here, and in which the urn's figures appear blissful and carefree. Lovers at play, pipe-playing musicians, and bountiful nature all create a happy feeling in the speaker. Here, then the speaker celebrates life, and the scenes frozen on the urn represent a kind of victory of life over death. Indeed, the speaker praises the lovers on the urn as forever panting and forever young, and notes that the tree beneath which they sit will never be bare. But the pictures on the urn are ultimately just that, pictures. All the lives depicted by the urn and the maker of the urn itself are long gone, and they only seem alive because they are rendered so well, performing actions that speak of vitality and humanity, yet are not themselves full of life. What's more, though the maiden depicted cannot fade, neither can her lover have thy bliss, that is written, and he can never kiss her in his frozen state. So this complicates anxiety about the inevitable march of time. given that to stop time essentially stops not just death, but life as well. And mortality is thus presented not simply as an end to, but also a distinct part of life. So, on the 8th, what men or gods are these? What maidens lost? So this realization dawns on the speaker through the course of the poem. Arguably, this is marked when the speaker introduces their own mortality in line 8. Here you see of stanza 3. All breathing human passion far above. So this moment brings to mind the speakers. I will show you this stanza on Edmodo. I sent you the full text of this ode. So you can see on the 3rd stanza and 8th line of these words, all breathing human passion far above. This moment brings to mind the speaker's own breath settling on the object of contemplation. To breathe is to be alive and to be reminded, in this case, of inevitable death. So, from this point onwards, the poem becomes less celebratory and more anxious. The busy scenes on the urn seem to speak of an emptiness and intimately linked to mortality. Then, by the poem's close, the urn becomes cold to the speaker. That is, its inanimate quality offers no lasting comfort to the speaker's contemplation of mortality. And ultimately, the speaker turns his realization on their own generation, which will be laid to waste by old age. The speaker then grapples with the question of mortality throughout the poem. At this, the beauty of the urn seems to bring its characters back to life, and at the stillness of the image makes their lives immortal. Eventually, though, reality sets in, and the urn makes mortality all the more present and undeniable. Sorry. So this is the 2nd stanza. I would like you to pause the video and read it carefully. Then I will skip to the other theme. So, other themes are art, beauty, and truth. So, Ode on a Grecian Urn examines the close relationship between art, beauty, and truth. For the speaker, it's through beauty that humankind comes closest to truth, and through art that human beings can attain this beauty. At its heart, the poem admits the mystery of existence, but argues that good art offers humankind an essential, if temporary, way of representing and sensing this mystery. So, the poem's famous ending is vital to understanding the speaker's position on art, beauty and truth, and contextualizing the lines that have come before. And the speaker's concluding sentiment, beauty is truth, truth, beauty, demonstrates that in the context of this poem, beauty and truth are one and the same. And art's role is to create this beauty and truth, but the speaker doesn't present beauty and truth as clearly definable aspects of human existence. The speaker feels this connection intuitively, that the one-way conversation with the urn and what it represents is an attempt to make sense of these intuitions. The speaker does, however, foreground the aesthetics of the urn throughout the poem and matches the seductive beauty of the object with a sensuous and delicately crafted linguistic beauty of its own. Though the poem cannot and doesn't try to pin down the precise relationship between art, beauty, and truth, its language works hard to be beautiful and to demonstrate that beauty is something valuable and essential to humankind. As one example of this above, the way the gentle F sound in soft pipes, so seems to make the P sound of pipes itself become quieter, just as the maker of the urn tried to give an authentic and beautiful account of the world in which it was made. The poem tries to bring truth, beauty to its rendering of the urn. The poem then offers no easy answers to the question of the relationship between art, beauty, and truth, but it does argue that these three are codependent and essential to one another. Furthermore, it may be that the strength of this relationship is partly dependent on its mystery. Perhaps you can see in this line, no, sorry, I think it's the next line. They have the lines that expressing the importance of beauty are together. Then whether or not people can achieve lasting beauty through art, the speaker feels deeply the importance of trying, which the urn seems frozen in time, and the melodies of the pipes cannot be heard. The trees cannot shed their leaves, and the people walking can never arrive at their ceremony. In short, everything is paused in eternity. This means that the beautiful sound of the pipes is, in fact, a kind of silence. The scenes thus become not just pictures of human life, but also abstract representations of beauty. They are pure beauty, untainted by having to actually exist or eventually die. If beauty is something to be aspired to, as the last lines seem to suggest, then the beauty of the urn is more absolute because it represents the idea of beauty itself, not just an attempt to make it. The poem then takes on a complex philosophical quality, considering beauty both as something that has to be aspired to by humans and as an abstract concept that perhaps ultimately lies out of human reach. Then it's the last stanza, fifth stanza, and I would like you to pause the video again and read this stanza carefully, and then I will talk about other theme. Which theme? It's history and the imagination. Yes. So pause the video and read it. So, history and the imagination. The ode on a Grecian urn, the speaker makes a powerful effort to bring history to life. The poem functions as a kind of conversation between an early 19th century speaker on the one hand and ancient Greece on the other hand. And of course, this conversation can only really happen in one direction. It's up to the speaker to imagine the lives and stories that, though once real, now only exist in the urn's pictures. Overall, the poem argues that imagination is key to understanding and sympathizing with what has come before, but that this effort can never give a full picture of the richness and detail of words that are long gone. Part of the speaker's fascination with the urn is that it's a genuine historical object that was created around the time of historical moment that it depicts. The craftsmanship of the urn, combined with sheer luck, has allowed a small part of the history that it embodies to survive for millennia. The speaker foregrounds the importance of objects in a relation of history by calling the urn a Sylvan historian. A Sylvan historian, yes. It's maybe fourth stanza. And the speaker emphasizes both the immense length of time in which the urn has existed, but also its silent, inanimate quality. That is, without an effort of the imagination on the part of the viewer, the urn itself says nothing about history. The poem thus partly becomes a real-time example of this effort to actively engage with the past. And eventually the speaker finds the urn to be cold. It can't satisfy the speaker's desire to bring the ancient world back to life. And that of course doesn't mean the effort is wasted. And just as the urn itself could never give a full account of the world at the time it was made, neither could the speaker truly hope to get a full sense of history through the urn. And nevertheless, a feel for the world of ancient Greece, however incomplete, has been achieved. The imaginative work of the speaker brings the imagination of the reader to life, and an atmosphere of a particular point in history is therefore brought to life too. And the cow being led to the sacrifice, for example, seems to both ground the action of the urn in ancient Greece and bring it momentarily to life. The speaker imagines the cow loving toward the sky, and a detail that seems specifically aimed at making the scenario more vibrant and present for the reader. And the poem acknowledged that no generation can ever have a full account of the world as it was before. Objects and imagination, though, help to tell history's stories. And just as the urn allowed the speaker to explore this subject within the form of the poem itself becomes an object that allows its readers to explore both the historical atmosphere of the urn and get a sense for the 19th century moment in which the poem was written. The Romantic poets had a deep interest in the classical world, and this ode shows a speaker trying to make sense of a relationship between those two distinct historical moments. So no object, whether an urn or a written account, can ever bring a historical moment into the present to be experienced in full detail, but objects together with the imagination to help to bring stories of the past of life, and it's in these stories that one generation relates to those that came before. The urn's world, as described in the poem, is full of human activity that felt familiar in the 19th century and still feels familiar now. History and the imagination therefore help humankind to relate to its past and see what one moment has in common with the next. Okay, sorry. Sorry for pausing. So now we are talking about symbols of this ode. The first symbol is music, and the second one is nature. Sorry. So, music. I hope that you looked at the whole text of this ode, and because to include all the text to this slide, it would be more than 20 or 30 slides. That's why I couldn't do it. I just add 3 stanzas and think that it's a 5-line poem, and to add all the lines to one slide it's impossible. That's why I just chose some of them, but you please look at the original text, which I sent you in Edmodo. And after that, you will be able to know that in which side of the poem the poet talking about music. Music is a symbol of human activity and creativity that occurs throughout the poem. It's first gestured in line 10 and then occupies a prominent position in the second and third stanzas. As with the order symbols of human life present on the urn, the music here is a paradox. So I will explain you what is the paradox. The urn is a silent, inanimate object. The music depicted by it can never be heard. Initially, the speaker takes this as a representation of the potential of art and its central role in creating a meaningful world. The piper in stanza 2 is frozen in a state of ultimate potential, both playing and not playing, that both stand for the idea of perfection in art and the impossibility of attaining this perfection. This isn't to do with the musician playing badly or well, it's the fact that the piper's song is locked in eternity that evokes such strong feeling in the speaker. Throughout the poem, as the speaker becomes increasingly vexed by thoughts about mortality, the musician functions as a kind of stand-in for the speaker. Both figures are engaged in the act of creation. The speaker is creating the poem, the piper is creating music, and so on. So, the speaker here senses that contained within their act of creation, however, is that same creation's destruction. Whatever meaning they create will eventually turn to waste. The musician, frozen in time and able to produce only silent music, embodies this contradiction. Furthermore, the discussion of music contrasts with the presence of silence that begins in the first line of the poem and continues throughout. Music is the organized patterning of sound, a way of physically and psychologically writing on the air waves. The urn cannot answer the questions posed by the speaker, remaining quiet in a way that is at odds with the function of music. And the second and last symbol is nature. I would say its main symbol is nature. The scenes on the urn are pastoral, that is, they are specifically situated within nature as opposed to a city. The natural world ties the speaker to the ancient Greek world they observe on the urn's surface. Though these are two very different times, the Earth's natural environment in which they are both situated is largely the same, and this suggests nature in part as symbolic of slow time itself, of the passage of time beyond human life, spans and comprehension. The speaker introduces natural imagery in lines 3 to 5 of stanza. First and expands on it during stanzas 2, 3, and 4. As with the musical activity portrayed on the urn, the natural world is depicted in a moment of stasis that contrasts with the vitality of nature itself. The trees never being able to shed their leaves is both a symbol of eternity and transience. In the world of the urn, the trees are frozen in a particular season, but the speaker and the reader know that this is not how the natural world functions. Seasonality is a marker of time and a representative of the ever-changing nature of life itself. The particular season in question here, spring, is associated with new life and the bountiful overflow of natural growth. Likewise, it has connotations of love and loss. The natural world is thus a cyclical space wherein change and implicitly death are essential to the creation of new life. And the presence of frozen natural imagery on the urn underscores that while death and time are absent from the urn, so too is the potential of genuine life. And let's talk about the form of the poem, the ode. As the title suggests, this poem is an ode. The ode is a verse form which dates back to ancient Greeks. I would like to translate it to Azerbaijani. Ode means qasida. So you know from Azerbaijan literature what's qasida. What does qasida mean? And Keats chose a form that fits perfectly within the object of contemplation, a verse form that harks back to an ancient world to match with an object made in the same era. Keats' poem consists of 5 stanzas, and each with 10 lines, so totally it's 50 lines. In its original form, the ode was often celebratory. This ode is markedly different in tone, however. Likewise, Keats' poem does not fit into the more traditional formats originally established for odes, for Homeric or Pindaric and so on. Keats developed his ode form because he felt that The other established forms did not quite fit what he wanted his poems to do. This poem is an inquiry and interrogation with which the sonnet, for example, would not be able to accommodate. And the ode form allows for a more prolonged examination of the urn and gives space to raise doubts and questions. One other point, verse nothing is that odes in the classical era were generally sung and or accompanied by music and dance. Music features in the image of the urn, but the poem is characterized by the quietness and silence with which the urn responds to the speaker. There is therefore a kind of gentle irony at play in Keats' choice of form, a musical tradition here expressing a kind of noiselessness. And let's talk about pentameter. So the meter in the poem is generally a finely wrought iambic pentameter. The stresses are well controlled throughout, establishing a refinement of craft that deliberately mirrors the craftsmanship that went into making the urn itself. Just as the skill that went into the urn is disappeared by its immediate beauty, so too the poem hides its metrical form by virtue of the careful attention with which it's rendered. And line 8 is an example for perfect iambic pentameter. Here I wrote for you, "What men or gods are these? What maidens loth?" There are, of course, some deliberate variations of the iambic pentameter throughout. Line 11, for example, can be scanned as a spondaic first food, but line 17 emphasizes the lover's boldness. So, bold over never, never canst thou kiss. To be sure, this sense of boldness is then undercut in the same line as the speaker forcefully repeats never, followed by canst. The meter in this moment reflects the contradiction between vitality and mortality in the poem. However, the lover may seem he is in fact still frozen in time on the urn and thus not really alive at all. Then the rhyme scheme, all stanzas begin with A, B, A, B in the first 4 lines. And though the subsequent 6 lines of the stanzas differ as follows. So I wrote here for you stanzas 1 and 5. The rhyme scheme is like that: A, B, A, B, C, D, E, D, C, E. So you see A, B, A, B, C, D, E, A, B, A, B, C, D, E, A, B, A, B, C, D, E. For all stanzas, first 6 lines, no, 7 lines are the same, but last 3 lines are different. But for stanza 2, yes, for all 7 lines are the same, and so AB for first 4 lines are the same, and CDE for 5th, 6th, and 7th lines are the same, but after 7th line, so 8, 9, and 10th. They are quite different rhyming schemes, so they don't have any order between these lines, and that's why it's quite different from the classical ode verse. Because, as I said before, John Keats wanted to create his own form to express her ideas and feelings. So that's the end, and I've sent you the full text of the Ode and a Grecian Urn, and please just read it carefully, all the stanzas and all the lines carefully, and pay attention to the rhyme scheme, and try to remember all the poems and odes that I expressed on our slide, because it's important for you on the exam, and try to analyze for the next time the ode, and I hope that you enjoyed watching the video. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.